Hello and welcome to ThePrint, a leading international body on human rights called the Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions, or GANHRI, reportedly deferred the accreditation of India's National Human Rights Commission, or the NHRC. And this has happened for the second year in a row. Why does this matter? It is a very serious signal to the NHRC that it's not up to the mark when it comes to global standards. To make sense of all of this today, I have a prominent human rights advocate, Henri Tiphagne, who is the executive director of People's Watch, a human rights organization based in Tamil Nadu that began its work way back in 1996. Mr. Tiphagne, thank you so much for joining us today.
Morning.
I wanted to ask you, the only other time that the NHRC's accreditation has been deferred was in 2016, and then it was restored a year later. Do you expect to see a repeat of this, or is the situation completely different?
In 2011, they got an A grade status, but an A grade status which actually carried a condition that they will come up for review of certain parts of the recommendation in the year 2012. This was then challenged by the then NHRC in the courts of Geneva because they are registered in Geneva, and a clarification was obtained that it can only be an A grade or B grade. And if they were not fit to be an A grade, they should not have been given an A grade in the place, and it should have only been deferred. I'm giving this as a matter of historical context so that your audience is able to understand it. Now, 2017 was a very tricky period for India. 2018 was our, and I want to use it, the term our, NHRC's 25th year, 25th anniversary. And obviously, they did not want to go through the 25th anniversary with a downgraded or a further deferred status in before the GANHRI. And therefore, all sorts of attempts were made. And I will leave it at that for people to understand, including assuring that they would immediately amend the Protection of Human Rights Act. Nothing was followed. If you look at the 2017 recommendations, you will see this assurance that the amendment to the Protection of Human Rights Act came only in 2019 and had nothing to do with the recommendations of 2016 during the deferral and 2017 when they got an A grade status. So this is what happened then. Now the situation is worse today. We are a second deferral, and to put the facts clear, after the Modi government came into power, this is the third deferral of the National Human Rights Commission. And this is something serious. And I say serious for human rights in this country, not for the global community. Serious for the human rights community in this country. Serious for other human rights institutions that we have, which others don't have. And therefore serious to us. We are conscious, patriotic citizens who are concerned about our institutions and the pride of our institutions. And the poorer our institutions are, the less protected we are on the human rights front domestically. And that is what actually matters. And therefore, this second deferral that has come now is very, very challenging because this proves that the 2011 recommendations were not followed, 2016 recommendations were not followed, 2017 recommendations were not fully followed, 2023 recommendations were, when the first deferral now took place, just the previous one took place, were not followed. This speaks something to the global community. And this doesn't reflect only on the NHRC. Let me make it very clear. I think we have to say this reflects on the government, which should have acted upon many of these recommendations, which have also a bearing to have been placed before Parliament. This should have been discussed by a parliament, even though a particular party may be in majority. The concern of the country and its image globally and internally should have made the government of the day intervene in this matter, which they did not do in 2023, which they have not done also in 2024. So let us not put the blame on the elections. Elections are one part of our democracy. The other part of our democracy is to see that our democratic institutions truly are maintaining the standards that they have to maintain internationally.
So, what is your expectations and what are human rights activists in India expecting in the very likely another term of the Modi government? How do you see the NHRC functioning over the next year?
See, let me be very, very plain to you. I mean, there are very few of us who are taking the pains to follow this up. And that is because the institution is not performing the way it should be performing. So people have lost interest in such an institution, to put the facts straight at the face. So if I speak to very committed, very deeply committed human rights defenders, women, men, whoever they are, they will tell me you are wasting your time with an institution which is not responding. Let us build an alternative to the NHRC in India. This is people's. These are activists' demand. So that is really their expectation. But we have to be practical, and therefore we continue to pester and push these issues, hoping that a government, a parliament would take this seriously. So this is not only the duty of the government that we see, it is the duty of parliamentarians from whichever political party they are coming to first educate themselves about what Paris principles are, what GANHRI is, what are these recommendations that were made, how sensible are these recommendations that were made, how Modi government has been extremely negligent. These are matters that need the attention of our parliamentarians. And therefore, what I expect is unless there is, and I emphasize, unless there is a strategic plan, and I hope the recommendations, when they are made public, would have that there, because this is what we had appealed for from civil society, from ANI and INI, which I represent here. We had asked for a very time bound strategic plan to attain a Pakka A grade status, which has indicators. And those indicators have to be made public so that civil society, so that other democratic institutions are able to see whether there is any progress being made. Let us not wait for the last 6 months. Let us not wait for the last 2 months and try to find out another reason why we were not able to perform. These are untenable. And therefore, it is clear that they have to have a strategic plan with indicators towards moving towards the recommendations that are made now, but ensuring that the past recommendations are also incorporated.
Very interesting. You had mentioned a few activists are suggesting creating an alternative to NHRC. What would that look like?
Well, when the NHRC keeps quiet on all major human rights issues, as was pointed out by the SCA in the year 2023, very clearly and categorically mentioned that in the CAA there were no comments made by the NHRC. The UAPA, there was no comments made by the NHRC, no public statements made by the NHRC. Why? On the FCRA, there were no public statements made by the NHRC. These were categoric observations made in the recommendations of 2023. And they had opportunities. NHRC has the power to intervene in litigations before any court of law where there are human rights issues. Why did Justice Arun Mishra, who speaks so much passionately about his own understanding of what human rights is, not being a former Supreme Court judge, not have the courage to intervene and make the Indian NHRC's position known in the CAA arguments that were put forth before the Supreme Court? In the many cases of the UAPA, which dealt with human rights defenders before the Supreme Court of India. Why? In the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act challenge that came before the Supreme Court, why was the NHRC silent? The NHRC has not remained silent on NADA. The NHRC has not remained silent in past history. Arun Mishra needed history to recall the powerful history of the NHRC. NHRC did not remain silent in the Durban conference on racism, which the question cast was to be discussed. And they took their position after traveling and having roundtables across the country. This is the powerful history of our NHRC. We might have been critical, but we are proud of past positions that they have taken. And therefore, that is what is expected by the NHRC, I would like to say.
So what you
from
were
the NHRC
describing
audit.
was suo moto cognizance, which is human rights institutions can take this when it comes to certain matters. And in fact, today, Wednesday, the NHRC put out its monthly newsletter where it mentioned its spot inquiry report into the Sandesh Kali violence in West Bengal. Uh, Basically, I wanted to ask you, do you feel as though the NHRC is taking suo moto cognizance in certain cases? I mean, would you expect them to do the same with, let's say, the Prajwal Revana case, where he's facing a massive sexual harassment case against him?
You are asking me a very tricky question. Let me be very candid in this. I now get scared when they take suo moto cognizance, because suo moto cognizance, in a way, is used as a weapon by the NHRC to carry out its political agenda. And I'm making it extremely clear. You have cited a case, and the case speaks for itself. In the second case that you have indicated, I won't be surprised if they take it. And I'll tell you
If they didn't.
I'll give you an example. They might take it. They might take it. And I will give you a concrete example of the Tuticorin killings, which everybody in the country knows. And today we are on 22nd May, which is the 6th anniversary of the popularly known Vedanta killings of Tuticorin. Vedanta is there no more because of the order of the Supreme Court, but not a single policeman has been prosecuted or found, in disciplinary proceedings even, found that he has missed after the Justice Aruna Commission of Inquiry that was appointed. Now, in this case, it is interesting to note that this is the suo moto case taken by the NHRC. I was a complainant before the NHRC. The NHRC took almost 6 months to recognize me as a complainant because they had taken suo moto cognizance, and their suo moto cognizance was closed in a killing of 16 persons, which has never happened in history, was closed on 25th of October 2018. I was forced to go to the Madras High Court in the Madurai bench and challenge their closure order. And of course, Justice Sandeep Banerjee took it to Madras, and then of course he was transferred for other reasons, perhaps, or maybe this, we don't know. And then he has retired since. The case is now currently out in court. A suo moto cognizance for the NHRC is suspected today, because this is one way of taking it up, pushing everybody out, including us. If we were before the suo moto case and our case was tagged on, they had the duty to also keep us informed and take our views in the matter. We would have brought it to the NHRC that a commission of inquiry was inquiring into the matter. We would have brought the NHRC and said a CBI was investigating into the matter, etc., etc. So suo moto cognizance has not been in the spirit in which the law had mandated it, and it is a very selective selection of cases that they take. And given the past history, the second case that you offer now might be taken so that in another be able to give a closure, and the whole country would say the NHRC itself has closed it. They use the NHRC for political purposes, and that is not human rights protection in this country.
We've talked a little bit about how the erosion of the NHRC's mandate has been observed by many activists, including yourself. I want to talk a little bit about the functioning. Currently, as far as the NHRC's website goes, they say that it consists of a chairperson, 5 full-time members, and 6 deemed members. But a lot of senior members will be ending their tenure at the end of this month. So starting June, in fact, there'll only be 1 member left. In fact, 1 woman, Vijaya Bharati Saini. How do you see this? The fact that there will only be 1 functioning member starting June.
This reflects on the incapability of Arun Mishra first. Arun Mishra is the chairperson of the NHRC. He has spent his 3 years here inviting the president of this country to the NHRC, the vice president of the country to the NHRC, the prime minister of the country to the NHRC, the Home Minister of the country to the NHRC, the Speaker of the Lok Sabha to the NHRC. These are the categories of people whom he has had the privilege, and I strictly say the privilege, of inviting to the NHRC to speak on its foundation day and to speak on Human Rights Day. When he poses, and as well, of course, to the Asia Pacific Conference of National Human Rights Institutions, which he hosted in the month of September last year in Delhi. In all these shows, this is the category of people who are politically powerful who are there, but he did not possess the capacity. He was incapable of ensuring that vacancies that have been existing for almost 1,000 days, and another vacancy which was existing for almost over 500 days, could be filled up by the Modi government. What is this? What show is this? Reduced the NHRC to a showpiece, and as a result, when he leaves on the 31st of May, which will be his last working day, along with his sole member, with Mr. Jain, a former director of the Intelligence Bureau, they both will be leaving. The NHRC, as you rightly pointed out, will be left with the sole member, who happens to be a woman member, Madam Vijaya, who was appointed in December 2023. Luckily, they appointed her. Otherwise, we would have had a headless NHRC. I am happy that we have a woman heading the NHRC, which perhaps all these men did never want, that a woman should head the NHRC. They always thought a black-robed man should always be sitting in that position, because they would never be able to get a woman there. I'm happy at least Madam Vijaya will be the only surviving NHRC member in NHRC after they demit their office. And the Secretary General who is here, who is a former secretary who has worked very closely with the Prime Minister while he was in Gujarat, and later also assisted him in the COVID work, was a selected person to be appointed to the Secretary General post, which he will be demitting in June 2024. So these are all top positions changed, which is going to leave the NHRC in a very bad shape. If this has to change, parliamentarians from all political parties have to independently take this issue up. For us, it is not NHRC. For us, it is NCW. For us, it is National Commission on Minorities. For us, it is the National Commission on Protection of Child Rights. For us, it's the National Commission for Scheduled Castes and the National Commission for Scheduled Tribes. For us, it's the Central Information Commission, the Chief Commission of Persons with Disabilities, and I can go on at the national level, 6 of whom are also serving as deemed members on the NHRC. And that is important, and that has to be protected. And therefore, the low level of governance of the Modi government in terms of a democratic rights agency in this country has been indicated through what is to come, even before the election results come in this country.
To add to your point about the functioning of the NHRC, and starting June, it's going to be very dire. I was speaking to a former NHRC employee in a report that was published on ThePrint last week. We'll include the link in the description. And the former employee who had worked there for 20 years said there's a lack of trained professionals. So you have a lot of people working on a contract basis. And that in itself, people who are maybe not given their, they've not given their entire careers to the cause of human rights, or have not, studied in this realm. Basically, unqualified people working on a contract basis can also affect the very functioning and effectiveness of the NHRC. And that's just something I wanted to add. My basic question, since we're sort of reaching the tail end of this conversation, is, do you think the path that the NHRC is going down is going to lead it to a downgrading of accreditation from A status to B status?
I want to make it very clear that Indian civil society always voiced its opinion for an upgraded NHRC. We are a poor graded NHRC, as we would like to call it in our language. We don't like a downgraded NHRC, because that is downgrading the protection and promotion of human rights in this country. And for us, a
Hmm.
downgraded NHRC would also simultaneously mean a downgraded host of 160 state and national human rights institutions in this country, which people outside do not know. And therefore, we are for an upgraded NHRC, but that will happen only if civil society is taken into confidence. They have to transform themselves, come down their pedestals, forget them, forget that they are former judges of the Supreme Court with whatever ideological positions they had, come to the roots of this country's human rights issues, have the frankness to debate, and we have the humility of people like, and I say people like Justice Verma, who told me on a one-to-one conversation after he had retired and before his unfortunate early departure from all of us, said, Henry, if I had not the civil society cooperation that I got, I would have been the same person I was in the Supreme Court. It is the civil society of all thematic engagements who educated me and ensured that I was able to draw inspiration from them and lead the NHRC. Where will these powerful words of wisdom ever enter any of these people who have been heading the NHRC? Remember, many of them are still alive. Justice Venkatacharya is alive. Mr. Virendra Dayal is alive. You have a few more. Justice Shivraj Patel has arrived. Justice Rajendra from Bangalore is alive. There are many people who are witness to an NHRC of the past. They have never had, the people in power never had the humility to go to them, speak to them, and find out what inspired them. Yes, there has been degradation, but yes, we had a very powerful institution which was gradually being built, and the builders of that institution are still in existence. And if somebody took them into confidence, I'm sure they would speak.
You brought up something quite interesting, that ACE status that the NHRC currently enjoys is not the reality on the ground. But the flip side is, if it does get downgraded to a B status, that's going to destabilize the work of a lot of human rights institutions that are in India. You mentioned 160. So that is sort of the tricky situation we are in. And just for our viewers, deferral of accreditation by GANHRI doesn't mean that a national human rights body cannot attend the UN Human Rights Council meetings. And in that case, also the NHRC is not technically forced to appeal against a deferral. It's only with the downgrading of accreditation that one can appeal. So we are very much in a gray area, with a lot of things that we've discussed. And I guess my last question to you would be basically a response to the fact that a few official sources had told me when I was reporting this story last week that, after all, GANHRI is a left-leaning Western institution. What do you think the message is trying to be communicated with a comment like that?
Well, I feel I pity the ignorance of those who have given you the answer at whatever level they are. They forget that they know little about GANHRI. They forget that they do not know that Germany was also deferred last year. They do not know that Australia, the seat of the Asia Pacific Forum of National Human Rights Institutions, was also deferred last year. There's a very stringent jurisprudence that is being developed vis-a-vis national human rights institutions globally. And they are trying now to look at more transparency in this process. People like us have insisted that parliamentarians of respective countries should also be taken into confidence. Why is it? Why is it that there were no other reports coming out from India? Why? Why should the report to the GANHRI subcommittee only be from the INI? Why did other civil society bodies here not go and file their reports about a very powerful NHRC that we have? GANHRI would have had that kind of access. Why did parliamentarians not get together, even if they were from a political party, ever do this, that shows the poor status of our parliamentarians, our parliamentary body in a country where we don't even have a parliamentary standing committee on human rights. And therefore, what has been told to you that we have a very poorly trained NHRC, or this whole comment of the left-leaning GANHRI, they are poorly informed, and I only pity their ignorance.
My last question, only because I'm quite curious, you mentioned a lot of activists want to put together an alternative to NHRC, which I know would be a mammoth task, but we're speaking hypothetically. You mentioned the various esteemed former justices who have not been approached and very much would be willing to talk. Do you think they would be part of this exercise of creating something alternative to the NHRC?
Well, I think they will be inspirational. They will inspirational in such an effort. I think their physical status today may not allow them to be as active as they would like to be, because given their age, etc. But I'm sure they will be a source of inspiration to us. Let us not forget that I'm alone, I'm speaking about this. There is a challenge now to the existing Election Commission of India that is also being looked into. So people are looking at alternative institutions to institutions that were powerful institutions that were created in India, which have become political mechanisms, and therefore alternatives are being looked at. And it is in that search of alternatives that we will continue to search in the future if civil society is not taken seriously.
Well, Mr. Tiphagne, thank you for taking the time out to speak to ThePrint on this very important matter. We will be tracking this, as I'm sure you will as well.